בגדוד יש המון ילדים, את חלקם אני אוהב, את חלקם אני לא אכיר.
Israeli soldiers were killed today, 8 Israeli civilians. And
but
on
some
the
young Americans are there in the middle of this conflict in the Middle East. Let's go straight to Fox.
At the age of 19, Michael Levin left the comforts of suburban Philadelphia to follow his dream. He joined the IDF, becoming what Israelis call a lone soldier.
On Tuesday, he was killed in action at Aital al-Shab, one of the fiercest battles troops faced in South Lebanon since the war began 3 weeks ago.
ארץ שחורת שמש, איה אותה ארץ, איפה אותה שמש. אומרים ישנה ארץ, עמודי השבעה, שבעה כוכבי לכת, צצים על כל גבעה.
Dearest Harriet, Mark, Elisa and Dara, I write this letter to salute the parents and sisters of the greatest hero I've ever known, Michael Levin, Zichrono Livracha, of blessed memory. I hope and pray that in these days of sorrow, You are beginning to find comfort in the knowledge that so many hundreds of thousands of people admire and look up to your son and brother Michael as the great Jewish hero he was.
My precious Dara, I am at a loss for words. You have been on my mind and in my prayers. Being Michael's twin has to make this hit you the hardest, and my heart is broken for you. Your family has suffered a horrendous loss, but God has gained a hero in heaven.
This is one of thousands of cards and letters we received from people, Jewish, non-Jewish, from all over the world. To many people, Michael was a role model and a hero. But to us, to our family, he was just our Michael.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Sally Mitlis, and I had the tremendous honor of producing Gibor Began Eden, A Hero in Heaven. I would like to take this opportunity to introduce the parents of Michael Levin, who are with us this afternoon. Mark Levin and Harriet. I'm sorry, it was just a very emotional moment watching that again. That piece was written by Shoel Chernichovsky, and the music was written by Naomi Shemer. And I decided to create the entire film based on these very simple but powerful words by a man who was born in 1875 and died in 1943. He became a doctor, an MD, but he also became the first sonnet writer in Israel, a poet. And he wrote about this beautiful land. And Naomi Shemer put it to a magnificent song, and Yardena Bar Kochba sang it. And I knew that this had to be the opening of this film because although Chernichovsky wrote this over a century ago, I know that Michael felt exactly the same way, as did I. I'd like to begin by asking Mark and Harriet to please share with us their memories of raising Michael and what he was like as a child.
Michael was usually in trouble. He was a normal kid. Rules weren't meant for Michael. He was no different than anybody else, except that at a very young age, Michael knew what he wanted to do with his life.
I still remember when he was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old. It was his birthday, and he insisted on having a birthday cake in the shape of a Jewish star, and it had to be blue and white, the colors of the Israeli flag. And I can also remember it was, again, he was no more than maybe 7 years old, 7 or 8 years old. And it was the high holidays, first day of Rosh Hashanah. And I was, we just came back from services. And I was sitting in the den reading the international version of the Jerusalem Post. And I hear this noise outside. And I don't know what it is. But it went away. And 5 minutes later, it came back again, lasted for about 30 seconds and went away. And I said to myself, if I hear that noise one more time, I have to get up and go to the front door and see what it is, because I do not recognize it. Sure enough, it comes again. And I get up, put down my newspaper, get up, open the front door, and there's Michael, who had just learned how to ride his two-wheeler, and he's driving around the neighborhood holding the steering wheel, the bicycle, with his left hand. And in his right hand, he has a shofar, and he's blowing the shofar, announcing to all of our friends and neighbors that the Jewish New Year had just arrived. So those are some of the early memories of Michael.
I know as he was growing up, he became more and more religious. And you already started to see at a young age that he was looking in one direction and one direction only. What was that direction, Harriet?
Israel and the IDF. Totally.
I remember you telling me that he would wear his Nimrod sandals to school in the middle of February when it's snowing. And I knew immediately that I related to this young man, even though I never had the honor of meeting him. I knew him because I knew what those Nimrod sandals meant to me and to so many others. And when you told me that, it really, really clicked. Are there any other stories you would want to share about his
sandals?
His devotion?
His sandals. I remember we were in New York for the millennium, and we went down to Broadway. It was after the ball had fallen, and the streets were emptying out, and a policeman stopped him and me and said, "You know, it's January 1st. Why are you letting your kid wear sandals? You should have shoes and socks on." I said, "You talk to him." When he left to Israel to go on Nativ's program, it was a blizzard here. The van that was picking him up was about 6 hours late. The snow was so bad. And I have pictures of Michael in a heavy jacket, but he had his notes on.
Just as a little side note, I just wanted to share with everyone that in August of 2006, I had heard, like so many others, that a young man had died defending the state of Israel, had been killed. And I went online and I went to the Associated Press page and I looked at this. And Harriet, you'll know the phrase because you've used it with me so many times. I look at this boy's face with those two black cherries for eyes, which I guess is a Yiddish phrase. And I scroll down the page and I see a picture of Michael's parents. And I didn't recognize the father, but when I saw the mother, I almost fell off my chair in the office because this is the woman who worked directly across the hall from me. And I have been passing in the hallway for probably over a year or so. I just never knew her name. She had bouncy blonde hair. She was adorable. And we always would say a good yontif or have a good Shabbos because we both had mezuzot on our doors. And little did I know that when I found out this news, that just a few hours earlier, the Consul General had come to tell you that you had lost your only son in battle. And we're going to come back to that. But I just wanted to explain what our connection was. And then we found out it went a lot deeper than that, Harriet. I want to talk now about Michael going to Israel and studying with Yossi Katz and David Karen. And we're going to play a clip now from the movie that describes what this experience was for his teachers in particular. I'm not sure if Yoni has that ready. Okay.
The Alexander High School in Israel, and it's here that Michael and I met for the first time when he came to our program in February 2001 for 2 months. But as you look around on the walls in here, you can see so many of the heroes and heroines who gave us 4,000 years of Jewish history on a silver platter. And Michael was sitting in here, taking it all up, soaking it in. I think already in class back then, we began to see the sparks of what kind of very special hero he was.
Michael came on Nativ on a very difficult year. It was the midst of the Intifada with all the suicide bombing. And we had that year a very small group. But I think the fact that he came showed his devotion to the state of Israel. I remember the first day he came to me and said, the reason why I came on Nativ was a kind of a compromise with my mother. And I must tell you, after the year of Nativ, I'm going to join the Israeli army. For someone to come at the first day of the program and to declare and say, make a statement, I'm coming back to Israel to serve in the Israeli army, was really an exceptional thing.
He came home from the end of the Nativ program. He went to New York, took care of his papers, came back home and said, my papers are done. I'm making Aliyah to Israel. I'm leaving.
He was always very funny, and he was always full of pranks, and he was always being silly. But on the other end of the spectrum, when it had to do with the security of Israel and all that stuff, he was so serious. But I guess that's Mike. That was, it was the wool hat and the baseball and the hockey. Shalom uvracha. But Israel was always there.
I've really just never seen somebody just thrive and just love Israel like he did. He had such a passion for it, and no matter what was going on here, he had nothing bad to say about Israel, which was just amazing, because it's very hard to be a new immigrant here by yourself and to deal with Israeli bureaucracy, and everyone complains, and there's nothing, what are you going to do? That's how it is. But Mikey, no matter what, he had that characteristic smile on his face, and he'd say, well, this and this happened, but I'm loving it here.
Mark and Harriet, what do you attribute this passion, this love for Eretz Yisrael? Talk to us about the influence your parents had on him, in particular, Harriet, and also your father serving in the United States Army, Mark. Both were a very big influence, I think.
Well, my dad was a decorated combat veteran of the Second World War, fought for 3 years in the South Pacific. And Michael was very inspired by him, but it's Harriet's parents, especially her father, that she should talk about.
I think there were certain stepping stones in Michael's life. One was his home life, and that we were very committed Jews and Zionists. I think my father played a much bigger role. He and my mother are both survivors of Auschwitz, and that really affected him. And he would spend hours talking to my father. The next stepping stone was Camp Ramah, which played a huge part in his life. And then finally going on Nativ and studying with Yossi Katz, who you just saw, who was from Philadelphia and followed his dream to making Aliyah and joining the Army. I think that showed Michael, you know what, you really can follow your dream.
And I think that you had shared with me after the film was completed, you shared with me something about something you discovered that was on his locker at his base. Can you share that with us?
So it was exactly 14 years ago, the first Yom HaZikaron, I was picked up and taken to Michael's Army base. Mark wasn't with me. And I met his fellow soldiers, and we were talking, and then all of a sudden they said, we want to show you something. A couple of things. One was his vest that he had on that when he fell in battle, which I brought home and is in his room. And then they said, well, maybe you want this too. And they brought out a trunk that was probably 4 feet high that he had painted red. And on the outside, he had the Phillies emblem. And when I opened it up, all over the inside were my father's numbers from Auschwitz.
Oh my. That had obviously a very tremendous influence on him. And I remember, Mark, you saying in the documentary that Michael didn't look upon the future of the Jewish people to be made on American soil. Though he was a proud American, he felt that the future of the Jewish people was going to be made on Israeli soil. And perhaps you can elaborate on that a little.
And he certainly wanted to be a part of all that. He knew the final chapter in history will be played out for the Jewish people in the land of Israel. And the miracle of Israel, now 72 years since its inception, Michael had to be a part of it. He had to be involved in it. He wanted to join the army, be a career officer, and do everything he could to keep that nation safe and to make his life there, for sure.
And he was loving it. he was loving it, as Benji Stewart said. He was loving it even when he was 3 feet deep in mud. It was Israeli mud, and he was defending the Jewish people. Mark, I want you to please recount for everybody the amazing story that you told in the film about how passionate he was to get into the army. I don't know, Yoni, if you have a clip that you want to play before Mark says this, I believe, where Tzvika Levy is talking about Michael.
It was about 6 or 7 months before he went to the army. He called to me sometime in Yom Shishi, and I said, hello, I'm Michael Levin, and people say that if I want to go to the army, you are the man. Listen, Mike, I don't know you. To put your name, I have to meet you. I spoke with all the young kids in the Ulpan who came to learn Hebrew, and I met a young fellow, very small one, with a kippah on his head, and all the time he's smiling and smiling and smiling. Mike, what do you smile all the time? I don't know, but put me in a parachute unit. I'm smiling, but I'm strong. Don't worry. Mike, got to eat some chicken, some cheese, bread. We fed a little bit. It's okay, I'm strong. I will prove it to you.
Mark, he wanted to be at Sanjan. Can you please try to explain for people that may not know how difficult it was to get into his unit and how he initially fell into the army? And I'll use those words.
Well, 2 different stories. First, Michael was waiting weeks, even months, for his permission papers, his induction papers, I don't know what they're called, and they never showed up. So we went down to the local, I guess it's called the induction office, and walked up to the front door, and there were 2 armed guards standing there, and they said to him, papers. He said, well, I don't have papers. That's why I'm here, to get papers. And they said, papers. He says, I don't have any papers. They went round and round a few times, and they finally told him to get away. So he walked over to the side, sat down under the tree, started to think. He's looking around the building, and he notices on the first floor of the building, there were bars on the windows of every window. There were no bars on the second floor. So he goes around the back of the building. It's a driveway, and he looks up, and he sees on the second floor, there's a window open about 6 inches. So what he does, he walks across the driveway, finds a trash dumpster on wheels, pushes it across the driveway up against the building, climbs on the dumpster, climbs up, and puts his hands on the windowsill of the second floor, and with one arm pushes the window open. He pulls himself up, tumbles into the men's room on the second floor, picks himself up, brushes himself off, walks outside, walks downstairs, finds the appropriate room, and the man says, next. Michael sits down. He says, papers. I don't have any papers. He says, son, you can't get through the front door of this building unless you have papers. Where are your papers? Michael said, what makes you think I came through the front door? And he told him how he gained entrance to the building. And the man says, you know, I've been here close to 20 years, and I think you are probably the first person to break into this building to get into the army. He says, sit down, we'll fill out your papers. That's the story.
And I remember when we filmed that story, and I had said to you, we've got to do it in one take. And I will never forget that moment, filming that moment when you told that story, because it must have lasted at least 1 minute and 30 seconds, and you didn't blink once. And when I went back to edit the footage, I was just so amazed how determined you were to get it and get it right.
Did I blink this time?
I didn't take notes. But I want you to talk now about this world of Sanchanim and his particular unit. Talk to people about what and how difficult it is to get into it.
There's 3 or I think 4 now paratroop brigades, 890, 101, 202, and I forget the other. As far as Michael was concerned, it was the best unit in Israel, which is debatable, but certainly one of the elite units. And Michael it gets permission to try out, and they're taking about, I don't know, maybe 25 people, and there's about 250 people that are trying out. So we're going to take 1 out of 10. And Michael calls me right before the tryouts, and for the first time ever, I saw some apprehension in his voice. He said, "Dad," he says, "I'm taking a look around, and some of these guys could like eat me for lunch." Michael was only 5'6", weighed 18 pounds after he ate. And I said to him, I said, "Michael, listen to me very carefully." I said, "I feel sorry for those other guys." I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "In any competition, and this is certainly competition," he says, "the very worst thing you could do is to underestimate the competition." I said, "When these guys take one look at you, they're going to completely dismiss you and say, 'What is this guy doing here?'" I said, 2 or 3 days from now, when you're running circles around them and carrying their packs and pulling them out of the mud, do you know how disheartening that's going to be for these guys?" And all he said was, "Thanks, Dad. I really appreciate that."
Thanks, Dad. Well, I think
Michael was chosen at the end.
Amazing. I remember the first time I saw you, Mark, was at Michael's memorial service, which was soon after you had returned from sitting Shiva in Israel. And I heard you speak, and I was so incredibly moved myself, which is one of my daughters turned to me and said, "Everybody's going to leave, and nobody's going to remember his story." And we were particularly moved by what you had to say. And it inspired me to make the film. I can only imagine how you inspired your son to serve the people of Israel, which he did. Harriet, I know you and I have spoken about this many times. I remember right before we went to press with the film, there was something that was bothering me because some people that knew I was making it said, "Hey, doesn't she just wish he didn't do all of this? Doesn't she just wish he would have stayed home, gone to college, and this never would have happened?" And I remember, Harriet, pulling you in because my office was right across from yours. I pulled you in, I sat you down, and what did you say?
I said, "No." I said, as a mother, of course, I miss Michael every single day. Not a day goes by in 14 years that I haven't thought of him, spoke about him, looked at his pictures. But as a Jew, absolutely not. Michael's life is no more important than any other Jewish boy or woman's soul in Israel. The Israeli mothers don't have a choice. Why should I? And this was Michael's dream. I don't believe that we could raise him and say, "Okay, be Jewish, but not that Jewish. Let somebody else do it." If we had in Israel, I don't believe that I would have lost my entire family. I would have had grandparents, aunts and uncles and cousins. But they had nowhere to go. And Michael understood that. The high price to pay. I also believe that that was his destiny. I believe very much in Yiddish, we say Basher. And he wanted to make a difference, and he certainly did.
And I think you also said Michael was exactly where he wanted to be. There were no regrets.
Absolutely. And he would do it all over again. He was the one who volunteered to lead the brigade into the house. Didn't have to do that. He didn't have to go back. He had a pass.
And we're going to
I would like to share some clips from the movie.
We're going to show that now.
כמה אש יש לו בעיניים כשהוא מדבר על שירות ועל המדינה וכמה זה חשוב וכמה שהוא יודע שאם הוא לא יהיה זה שיהיה כאן אז לא יהיה מי שיהיה במקומו.
That's the truth, man. No pain, no gain. You don't take the pain, you're not going to go into the best units.
No pain, no gain, Tzvika. This sentence, I will never forget it. You say, Tzvika, it's going to be very hard, I know. But When it's hard, I feel good.
לא חושבים על לא כאבים פה, לא כאבים פה, לא כאבים, הכל פה ולרוץ קדימה.
החברים שלי בארצות הברית, בפילדלפיה, כל משפחה שלי שם. אני ממש מתרגל לכם.
לא יישאר בארץ, הוא ילך, אנחנו נמצא לו פה קלה, נחתן אותו. נכון?
נכון.
שיהיה חזק ושימשיך.
תודה.
Michael Levin, it was about...
I just wanted to say as a side note, we lost Zvika Levy to ALS, and that was Zichrono Livracha. That was very difficult to witness and to hear about. He had a real passion for your son.
He did,
as did so many others. One thing that I was that fascinated me through the journey that I took in Michael's footsteps, where there were so many Americans that I met along the way. And some of them were tzantranim, some of them were teachers, but they were Americans, and some were from Philadelphia. And they had either made aliyah with their families or on their own. And I was prepared to really make sure I could understand everything being said in Hebrew. My Hebrew's okay, not that great. And was shocked with how many very proud Americans were wearing the uniforms. And I just wanted to share that. Mifaked Gilad, Harriet and Mark, I want you to talk about, that's one word I think a lot of people learned in Hebrew, Mifaked, which means officer. We don't have that clip to show, but I want you to talk about Gilad and what he means to you, in particular, Harriet. I know that you're going to say some beautiful things.
Watching him is the hardest, and that's why the tissue. Was Michael's commander. Michael was crazy about Gilad from the moment he met him. And always, he wanted to be Mifaked Gilad's friend, but he couldn't be. And Gilad talks about that. He snuck away when Michael was first inducted into the army to be there for him. When he became a paratrooper, he was there for him. And I didn't understand why he wasn't at the funeral, but he was in Lebanon at the time. When Mark and I came back for Shiloshim, 30 days to unveil Michael's tombstone, Gilad called and said, I really have to meet with you alone. And he had spoken to Michael. They were in Lebanon, but not together. And during the night, they asked Gilad if he would help carry a fallen soldier out of Lebanon. And he said it was the least that he could do if someone gave his life is to carry him and bring him home. And while walking, he said, oh, he's very light, very light. How come the soldier is so light? And they said, don't you know, it's Michael Levin. And he really went into shock afterwards. And he just couldn't believe that after all that he was the one who carried Michael back into Israel. And it is 14 years later, and he is on our board in Israel. His family is our family. When that siren blows, he's always by my side. He's a part of me.
I have to say, Harriet, that when Gilad's name was on my list and I knocked on his apartment door, his family's apartment door, I was a little nervous because I was about to meet an officer. And the door opens up, and this 20-something-year-old answers the door and invites me in, and I'm sitting across from him, and I realize this is Mifaked Gilad. After our interview, his mother takes me by the hand, and she said, do you want to see the Mifaked's bedroom? And she takes me back into his small bedroom, and there, right by his bed, just as he said on film, is a picture of the two of them, Michael and Gilad. So she said to me, when he says that Michael is by his side day and night, he means it. And
it's still there.
It's still
and he's
there.
Married with 2 daughters now, and Michael's picture is still by his side.
Yeah, I believe it. Yoni, we're going to now go to the next clip.
יום שישי, and I say, hello, I'm Michael Levin, and people say that if I want to go to the army, you are the man.
I'm pretty sure I know exactly how Mikey felt the first time he put on his uniform, because I'm 100% sure it's the same way that I felt the first time that I put my uniform on. It's just a feeling of intense pride, and you're just, I don't know how to explain it other than that, just that you're so proud to be wearing, an Israeli army uniform, that, this is your country, this is the Jewish country for Jewish people, and you feel as though you're doing your part to defend it, and you're in uniform, you have a weapon and you're in uniform, and your job is to defend the Jewish country and the right of the Jewish country to exist, and just the amount of pride that you have inside when you're walking down the street, and whether it's Israelis looking at your uniform or whether you're walking through Kikar Tzion and there's a bunch of tourists who are kind of staring at you, wow, an Israeli soldier, because you feel like you're something more now. You're not a tourist anymore. You're part of the country. You've come here to do something. You've come here to volunteer, and you're really integrating into the society and giving your all.
After you walk 90 kilometers to get the red hat, on his back 40 kilo, and he is smiling. I say to myself, what's going on here? Only 90 kilometers, it's nothing, Tzvika. If you believe, it's okay. If you don't believe, it will be very hard. And I believe, that's why it's not so hard for me.
The first jump that they did, Michael weighing 118 pounds, was so light he totally drifted off course. So his second jump, they put weights on him, and he came down with a really hard thud. But, he was a lightweight. He used to call me and say, Ma, these guys are ripped. He says, I'm like nothing next to them.
When we got our Red Berets together at Ammunition Hill, it's just, there's so much history of Israel, history of the Jewish people in Israel proper. And, when you finish that 90-kilometer march and you finally get that Red Beret and you're standing on the same spot where the paratroopers fought so hard and lost so many, and it just kind of really ties in the feeling of, wow, this is our land. This is essentially, this belongs to us. This is our right as Jews to be here and to defend this land and have people live in it.
When Michael was inducted into the Israeli army, Mark and I flew over to be there for him, and I think that was one of the proudest moments in his entire life.
It's a dream come true, something I've wanted since I was a little kid. It's something no words could describe what it means to me.
He's a good one. I saw him training.
I know.
He's working very, very hard, and I'm proud of him.
From the time he was a little boy, he always said he was going to go to Israel and he wanted to fight in the army. And everybody said, when he grows up, he'll change his mind. And I said, no, he won't. And that was his dream, always.
I think God gave him this Zionist neshama.
כל פעם שדיברתי איתו, ראיתי כמה אש יש לו בעיניים כשהוא מדבר על שירות ועל המדינה וכמה זה חשוב וכמה שהוא יודע שאם הוא לא יהיה זה שיהיה כאן, אז לא יהיה מי שיהיה במקומו.
I think the amazing thing here is I mentioned in the beginning of this Zoom session that I had never met Michael. So how do we have all this footage? If I remember correctly, Mark and Harriet, I believe that somebody was doing a documentary on Chayalim Bodedim, on lone soldiers, which we're going to get to very shortly. Being a soldier in Israel, not having family to support them. And they decided, of the hundreds, if not thousands, of Chayalim Bodedim, they decided to follow two and tell their stories. And one of them, I believe, was Michael. Is this true?
Yes, it is.
I wanted to also point out, and we're very grateful to the producers to allow us to use that footage. I wanted to point something else out. When you were discussing Michael jumping from the plane, I had shown the documentary before it debuted to Tzvika, and he was very moved by it, but he said to me, Sally, you need a little more tach, tach, boom, boom. And he got in his car and went down south, went to an army unit and got permission to bring footage back of soldiers jumping out of planes and also some of their practice maneuvers. And he gave me that footage to add to the production. And I felt that it just pushed it up to a much higher level because of his act of just kindness doing that and his devotion to Michael.
I remember that.
The one other thing I wanted to say is when I did show the film in Israel, I had a documentary filmmaker watch it, and he was very unimpressed. And he said to me, you are an American, you're making this whole thing through your blue and white colored glasses, and you're not telling the real story. And I remember calling Bruce Lipton, who was a tremendous help in this production, and Yossi Katz, his cousin, and who also was a tremendous influence on me. And Yossi in particular had a few expletives for that person who said that. And the documentary maker who said it was actually the child of Holocaust survivors. And he said, I don't consider myself a Jew first. I consider myself a Zionist, an Israeli first. And when I heard that and I shared that with Bruce and Yossi, they set me straight, and they made me understand what the messaging was in this film. And it all goes back to Michael's vision of an Omrim Yeshna Eretz. They say there is a land. And it was a very interesting experience. We're actually going to move forward now to one of the most difficult moments. And that was when you found out that your only son had been killed in action. I want you to share with everybody what had happened, I believe, not even, what was it, 24 or maybe 48 hours earlier in Newtown. What was going on before, or maybe it was already when Michael had gotten on the plane and gone back to Israel.
It was actually only the night before, not even 24 hours. And I was at work across the hall from you. And my rabbi had called and hung up on me, and then called again because caller ID, I knew who it was. And he asked to speak to my boss. And the next thing I knew, he was at the door with the Consul General of Israel. And because of the memorial service the night before, it wasn't a memorial service, I'm sorry, it was a service in support of Israel and the war that was going on.
Big rally, yeah.
It was huge. I thought they came to talk to me because of Michael, because at that rally they had mentioned that a congregant's son was fighting in Lebanon. And then they took me into my boss's office and shut the door and proceeded to tell me, and you become like an idiot. And you say, what do you mean? You know exactly what they mean. But one of the first questions that I asked was, are they going to bring Michael out of Lebanon? I was only afraid they were going to leave his body there. And I asked if they were sure that it was Michael. And my rabbi turned to me and said, would Michael take his dog tags off? And I said, no. And I didn't know then Israelis wear two sets of dog tags, one around their neck and one inside their boot. There's like a little secret compartment. And they said Michael had his dog tags on. And pretty much the rest of it was a blur. We went, Elisa, Michael's older sister, happened to have been doing a mural in the same building. And we called her upstairs. Michael's twin sister, Dara, was working a couple blocks away at Ramah Day Camp. We went to tell her, and then we proceeded to come home to tell Mark. And then we made arrangements to go to Israel to bury him.
And you had to make a decision about where your son was going to be buried. Was there a decision to make?
No.
the year before, I sat down with Michael when he was home on leave, and I said, he was telling me that he was on some very dangerous missions in Shechem and Jenin, Judea and Samaria. And I said to him, I said, you know, Michael, I said, we're about to have a discussion that no father should have with his son, but God forbid, you know, you should fall in combat. I said, your mother and I are going to have to make a decision what to do. And he says, and his exact words to me were, well, it's up to your mom, but if you're asking me, he says, God forbid that should happen, I want to be buried in the military cemetery for Herzl in Jerusalem. So when word came down and Michael fell, it took the two of us about 30 seconds to decide where he should be buried.
We're about to watch a very emotional and powerful clip.
אמר לי, לא, אני בשורה הראשונה, אני מקדימה תמיד.
מייקל לוין.
אמר לי, לא, אני בשורה הראשונה, אני מקדימה תמיד. כלום, אני עצבני מאוד על המפקדים, אני עכשיו רוצה להיכנס, תיקח אותי איתך, עם החיילים. אמרתי לו, בסדר, מייקל, תשמור על עצמך ויהיה בסדר. אנחנו עוד ניפגש בפנים, אתה תראה. ניפגש ויהיה בסדר. ככה, מילה ישראלית, יהיה בסדר.
Mike pushed all the time to go into Lebanon. And he say, okay, Tzvika, I'm going out, everything is okay, I'm going into. Mike, take care. Don't worry about me, we'll speak after the war.
This is probably the last picture of Michael. It was about 2 hours probably before we went in. Well, I remember when we got on the bus before we went in, and actually, I asked somebody that was religious if I could borrow his kippah to say Shema Yisrael, and Michael just took his kippah off his head and he said, "Here, take mine." I looked at his kippah and his thing's huge, it's bigger than his head, and put it on, said Shema Yisrael. He looked at me and said, "All right, you ready now?" I said, "Yeah, I'm ready." And I gave it back to him, put it on his head.
במהלך התנועה של הכוח של מייקל הם נתקלו ממספר מוקדים, גם ממבנים וגם משטח פתוח. הכוח שלו נלחם ותפס מבנה, נערך בו להגנה, ובמהלך ההיערכות להגנה, לצערנו הרב, צרור של מחבל שנורה מחוץ למבנה, חדר פנימה דרך אחד הפתחים, פגע במייקל ופצע עוד שני לוחמים שהיו ממש סמוכים אליו.
It was really hard doing it. But we did it for about 20 minutes. And at the end of it, both me and the medic, both were totally exhausted and felt like we were going to pass out. And stopped, gave the other medic a big hug, and told God to take care of Michael.
Shlomi Singer. What a gibor. What a gibor he is. I remember filming him and it had been just weeks after Michael had been killed. And I look at this young boy who had held him in his arms. And we're now going to go to the actual funeral And I just wanted to say one thing about it. I did not know how to portray the funeral. I didn't know how to give it, to do justice. And I remember pulling Toby Ayash, who was across the hall with the Rama, into my office. And we kept listening to different music and different versions of different things. And then when I took Shai and put the song Shai, sung by the Pavarim, to this unbelievable moment, it clicked for me, and it clicked for her. And I had to give up one of my favorite songs. It's funny, the songs that are used in this film were almost like good friends, and I had to give it up because I can't listen to that song without bursting into tears. But I think that it portrays all the emotion that happened that day. And let's watch that.
אמר לי, לא, אני...
When we pulled up to the cemetery, my first reaction was that of disappointment, because I saw hundreds and hundreds of people outside the cemetery, in cars and taxis everywhere. And my very first thought was, great, there must be 5, 10, who knows how many, 15 funerals going on at one time. It's going to be crazy in there. Little did we know that everyone that was there for Michael. The crowd was huge. Could have been in the thousands. That there were trucks mounted with loudspeakers that went through the streets of Jerusalem that day, singing to the Holy Man from America. A soldier in the IDF had fallen in battle and was being buried that day. And people came from all over the country. Secular, Reformed, Orthodox, Black Hatters. It was a fast day in Israel for the religious, Tisha B'Av. People walked for hours and hours, fasted all day, and walked halfway across the city just to be there. For some reason, Michael's story, the ideals that he stood for, his sacrifice, captured the hearts and the minds of people all over the country. And they all wanted to be there for us that day.
Harriet and Mark, We're coming close to the end of the hour, and I don't want things to come to an end without you talking about how you have honored your son's memory.
When Michael was in uniform for about a year, we would speak to him every Friday, about 7:30 in the morning for us, mid-afternoon for him before Shabbos. And he would call us and he would talk to us. It would be our weekly call and we'd talk to him. And invariably, every conversation, Michael mentioned that there is a problem that he's having. He needs some help translating some documents. His Hebrew wasn't that good. And he doesn't know who to go to, or he needs a fax machine and he can't find a copying place. Or it's the Super Bowl and he wants to get together with other lone soldiers and watch it because they're off and he doesn't know where to go, what to do. Or it's Shabbat coming and he's off, but he doesn't have a place to go for dinner. And it went on and on and on and on, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 times over a year. Then Michael, in his own mind, he connected the dots. And he went to a friend of his, Tziki Ode, who worked for the Jewish agency, who worked with lone soldiers. And he said to Tziki, he says, 1 year from now, when I finish my service, you and I are going to start a lone soldier center. And Tziki said, great, what's that? And Michael laid it all out for him. There were people in Israel that ran around doing what they could to help lone soldiers, but there was no national organization. Michael knew that. He saw the need for it. Michael was a dreamer, and he saw the need for this. He had this vision of the center because there are thousands and thousands and thousands of lone soldiers in Israel, over 1,000 just from the United States. And long story short, a year or two after Michael's passing, Tziki, along with some other former lone soldiers with our help, got together and started the Lone Soldier Center to make Michael's dream come true. And I'm proud to say that now there are multiple centers and multiple locations doing everything we can to help lone soldiers before, during, and after the service, including Shabbat meals, food truck deliveries on Army bases, pre-Army counseling. We are supporting close to 150 lone soldiers in housing units across the city, Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. There's guidance programs, there's social events, there's visiting soldiers in the field. We're doing everything we can to help lone soldiers.
And now during the virus, that we can't offer the meals in the center for Pesach, which just passed, or for Shabbat. And if the soldiers register, they have drop-off service to make sure they have whatever it is that they need.
After a protective edge in Gaza in 2014, there were a number of soldiers who were badly injured and had to go to the hospital for therapy. So the Lone Soldier Center rented them apartments on a short-time basis for a couple of months right next to the hospital and drove them to therapy. So we're doing everything we can to help lone soldiers, and this was all Michael's idea.
What a way to preserve his memory.
Prior to Michael's passing, the idea of the center, it was unheard of. The knowledge of lone soldiers, it was just something that was under the radar. But Michael was the turning point in Israel.
Mark, how can people donate for the Lone Soldier Foundation?
First of all, we have a multi-million-dollar budget to support all the centers, and we don't get any money from the Israeli government. It all comes from passionate Americans and Israelis and people that want to support lone soldiers. And all you have to do is go on the website, lonesoldier.us, to find out more about the centers and to make a contribution.
Harry, before we end with the ending clip of the film, which brings us back to Omrim Yeshna Eretz, as only Yossi Katz could do. I want you to explain to anyone that should meet you what it is that you wear and have worn every day of your life since the funeral.
Well, today I have 2 pins on. One is the mourner's pin that you wear in Israel traditionally. Mark's telling me you can't see it. That's the mourner's pin. And this is from 890 Battalion paratroopers. When the funeral was over after the 21-gun salute, Michael's friends from his unit came over to us and took their pin off and gave it to me and said, "You're part of the paratrooper family now, and you'll always be with us." And I've worn it every day, and it's having Michael with me, it's having the unit with me. It's brought me some incredible friends who have asked about it, and then they've come into my life. So it's here.
Well, I just want to personally say that this is a film I never wanted to make, but I consider it the greatest honor in the world. And maybe it was a bit bashert that it'd be my responsibility. And I'm so grateful that I can call you family. And I'm so grateful that you would have ordinarily been in Israel right now. Yom HaZikaron is starting. It already started in Israel, and we're going to end now with the ending of the film.
So before that, I would like to thank Harriet and Mark for sharing the story of Michael, and thank Sally Midless. And I would like to let you know all that tonight at 8:30, we are conducting the ceremony for Yom HaZikaron. You can find out all the information on the IEC at Home website, and it's tonight at 8:30.
Mike is definitely, oh yeah, we could definitely say that Mike is our hero. Definitely a hero for us. He protected me, he protected my baby, protected everybody who lives here.
One of the great Zionist poets was Shaul Chernyakhovsky, whose poetry has touched so many with his passion and love of Israel. And in one of the poems, Omrim Yeshna Eretz, they say that there is a land. There are a couple of lines that touch me because I believe that they were talking about Michael. The poem says in the middle here, Shalom Lacha Akiva, Shalom Lacha Rabbi, Efo Hem HaKdoshim, Efo HaMakabi, Onelo Akiva, Onelo Arabi, Kol Yisrael Kdoshim, Ata HaMakabi. Peace to you, Rabbi Akiva. Peace to you, Rabbi. Where are the saints? Where is the Maccabee? Answers him Akiva. Answers him the Rabbi. All of Israel is sainted. You are the Maccabee. These are words that really talking about Michael, because Jewish history was not just made by all the famous people that we know about. Jewish history was made by people like Michael, who gave their heart and soul for Israel. And Michael wanted to be a Maccabee. And in the end, he died becoming that hero.
They say there is a land drenched in sun. Where is that land? Where is that sun? Where is that sun? Where is my son? My son is a hero in heaven.
I'm so proud of you.
מי ינחה
Go ahead. You always make me cry, Sally.
Johnny, thank you for everything.